In this workshop, Joseph Buddenberg and Jerry Vlasak will train activists in staying safe both in person and online as animal rights activists, including defining security culture, exploring possible threats and risks as activists, who and what to avoid, what is an infiltrator? Jerry and Joseph will share their personal experiences recognizing and handling infiltrators, handling police and FBI visits and interactions, grand juries, what to do if subpoenaed, tips and strategies in general for maintaining safety for yourself and your group during activism. So my name is Michelle Granberg and I am your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey and I've been a vegan and activist for almost 6 years. AAM's mission is to eradicate violence and build a culture of empathy and compassion, which ultimately results in animal liberation. We strive to build a global community of activists through our free online program that pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we strive to generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public on various aspects of animal rights activism. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person activism events. AAM is also proud to be fueled by FARM, the Farmed Animal Rights Movement, one of the oldest AR organizations in the country. If you're interested in applying to become a mentor or mentee or want to get involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. So it's my pleasure to welcome both Joseph and Jerry as speakers tonight. They are both experienced activists, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And again, reminding you that we'll open up for Q&A after this presentation. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Jerry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for having us here. It's a great thing that you guys are doing, and it's always great to be involved with animal activism mentorship. What we're going to do tonight, what Joseph and I are going to do tonight, is talk a little bit about activist security, what it is, why we need it, and how you can practice it. So just as some background, both Joseph and I are press officers with the North American Animal Liberation Press Office. It was an organization founded in 2004 to serve as a spokesperson or a organization for the underground animal activism movement. There was nobody doing that at the time, and there were a lot of underground actions going on. And we felt like that the media should be able to hear the other side of the story, why people were breaking into laboratories, why people liberating animals from conditions of abuse. And so even though there had been a press office off and on over the years, there hadn't been anything going on consistently, and so we created that. As part of that, we realized that security is an important issue. Security to keep the activists safe that were out there breaking the law to help animals, and security to keep ourselves safe so that we could continue doing what we were doing. And we're speaking to the mainstream media, supporting prisoners who might spend time in jail, although there aren't very many and never have been. So activist security was important to us, and those of us that were working in the field had been around the animal activism movement for quite some time, and we're aware of a lot of the things that are involved. But now it's my chance to pass that on to some of you guys who may not have heard some of these things. So what is security culture? Security culture is a way of behaving, for activists to behave that minimizes the chance that animal abusers and law enforcement, who are their enforcers, can slow us down in our struggle for animal liberation. So by using some very simple and common sense behaviors, we can limit the opportunities for our opponents to slow us down and to inhibit our effectiveness. So there are a few things that we can do. Why there are law enforcement, anytime that an activist is effective, there will be somebody that wants to make that go away, because people are making a lot of money by abusing animals. And when they see something coming down the pike that looks like it's threatening their profit, they call in their law enforcement team, they call in their lawyers, and they find ways to try to stop that. And the more effective you are, the stronger they will try to stop you, and the more activist security that you need. I'm going to share a screen here just for a minute if I can. I don't have many slides. I just made a couple. These are just, if you can see this, these are just some of the things that Joseph and I are going to talk about tonight. Definition, we've talked about a little bit about the definition of security culture. My next point that I'm going to just about to make is talking about threat levels. Later we'll talk about some online things you can do to minimize risk, some offline behavior, things to do at demonstrations and dealing with the police. And then especially Joseph specializes in talking to infiltrators, snitches, and grand juries, so he'll have plenty of chance to talk about that. So regarding threat levels, why do you need security culture? Why do you need to be aware of these sorts of things? People will say, well, I'm not breaking the law, why should I worry about it? Well, depends on what kind of a threat level that you are facing. So if you're going to a demonstration once in a while, maybe a PETA demonstration or something, and there's not a lot of risk involved, then you may not need a lot of this stuff, and it may not be all that important to you. But as your risk level changes or your threat level changes, say you start doing disruptive demonstrations, maybe in support of a focus campaign against the fur industry, for instance, like is going on with Coalition to Abolish the Fur Trade, and you start showing up and maybe disrupting business as usual, and maybe making some people mad, and some of these people don't want you coming back. Then there may be some things that you want to do to minimize the effect that those people can have on you. And of course, if you up the threat level to another stage, say that you're willing to go out there and break the law to help animals, say that you're aware of an animal abuser in your neighborhood and you want to take some form of direct action to stop that, then you definitely need to have some idea of what security culture is all about, so that you can stay safe and not end up having to deal with law enforcement and therefore become less effective activists. So each of us can decide what our own threat level is, but there are some very basic things that everybody can do, and it's not much work. It doesn't take a lot of effort, and it will make you have less opportunity to worry about someone trying to step into your life and make things difficult. So we'll talk about some online behavior first. Everybody uses text messaging, everybody uses email, everybody uses some form of social media for the most part these days. So I just thought I would outline a very few things you can do in these areas to keep yourself safer, to make yourself less vulnerable to those who might want to stop you or inhibit your activities. So starting with online behavior, and let's start with texting. Everybody sends text messages. Maybe we all send dozens of text messages every day. If you're using just a regular old text messenger application that came on your phone, then that's a very vulnerable place that anybody can look at. Anybody can read your text messages. Anybody can follow what you're doing. Anybody can do anything, and it can be a 15-year-old kid in his mother's basement. It doesn't take a lot of technology or a lot of special know-how. Luckily, there are applications that are very simple to use, that are very easy to encrypt your communications using text messages. Some of the easiest ones and the more well-known ones are Signal. It's a free app that you just download, and if you send it, basically it looks just like a regular text messaging app. And when you send a text from your Signal app to someone else's Signal app, it's encrypted from end to end, and nobody can read that, even if it is intercepted. Even the people at Signal claim the company claim they can. It's open source software. It's generally fairly safe that nobody's going to be reading your text messages. Another one is WhatsApp. A lot of people use WhatsApp anyway because it has lots of other good benefits, such as easy to send images and things like that, especially overseas, and a lot more people overseas use it even than in the United States. Again, it's encrypted from end to end. If you're talking from one person on WhatsApp to another person on WhatsApp, nobody can read your messages. Now, WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, so as you can all guess, it's not that safe. I mean, there are theoretically people at Facebook who could at least get the data from your conversations. In other words, they can say, okay, well, Jerry was talking to Joseph on the night of, May 5th, and by the way, this is something else happened on May 5th, and so, we can go back and forth, and they can figure, well, and then Joseph, after Jerry talked to Jerry, then he talked to somebody, and they may not be able to see exactly what's in the messages, but they can definitely get a hold of the metadata, which is what that information is called, and they have and are certainly able to hand that metadata over to law enforcement if they want to. So same with Signal. Signal claims that they won't do that, but they almost certainly will. I don't know if they have done it in the past, but they probably have, and probably if they haven't, they will. They can turn over some of that information, and so nothing is absolutely safe. So again, it depends on your threat level. If you're planning a demonstration, no matter how vociferous that demonstration might be, or whether that demonstration is not something that you want everybody to know about, chances are nobody's going to, get a subpoena and go down to the WhatsApp company and try to find out any more information about that. On the other hand, if you're planning an underground direct action, and there's been a whole bunch of other underground direct actions in the neighborhood lately, you can bet law enforcement may make use of that. So that's, and if you're at these higher threat levels, you don't want to be talking on WhatsApp or Signal or on any other social media. Those are conversations that should be carried out in person, and they shouldn't be carried out in your house. They shouldn't be carried out in your car. They should be carried out in a place where people aren't likely to be listening to you. And by the way, anytime you have a cell phone with you, you can be listened to, even if your cell phone is turned off, even if your cell phone has all kind of different security measures instituted. If they want to, they can listen to you on your cell phone. So just keep that in mind. Again, most people at most people's threat levels, doesn't really matter if people are listening on your cell phone, but it's something that can happen. So that's text messaging in a nutshell. Email is the other thing that people still use to some extent, not as much as they used to. And email, if you're sending an email from your Gmail account to somebody else's Gmail account, or somebody at Yahoo or something, that is very easy to intercept. It's not encrypted. It's very easy for people to read that without much trouble, and they do all the time. I mean, those messages are accepted in bulk and traded around the internet all the time. It's very easy and free to use other methods of email communication. A lot of companies out there that specialize in that. Our favorite is Proton Mail, which is available at protonmail.com. Anybody can get a Proton Mail address or more than one address. You don't have to use your real name if you don't want to. And anytime you send an email from your Proton Mail account to someone else's Proton Mail account, that message is heavily encrypted using PGP technology. It's all automatic. You don't have to do anything special. You just type in an email just like anybody else does and send it off. And it's fairly safe. The good thing about Proton Mail is they also make an encrypted calendar if you want to keep your calendar and make sure that it's private and stays encrypted online. And they also make a good virtual networking application, which we'll talk about in a second. And they bundle that all together, and I think if you want the fastest speeds and everything, then they want to charge you a little bit every month. But they're a good company, and I would encourage you to support them. There's lots of other companies out there besides Proton Mail. If you just do a search on secure email, you'll come up with that. So that's another way to do it. Another way to stay safe if you don't want people reading your email. As far as social media, it's a big topic, and I'm not going to go into all of it right now. Suffice it to say that everything that you post on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or anywhere else, all of that is public. All of it is forever. You'll never get rid of it. It's always going to be there. And it may you're not. I realize people aren't planning illegal actions and things like that on social media, but just your general outlook and your general philosophy is there for everybody to see, and it can come back and harm you in the future if again you become as you become more and more effective activists with AAM's help, I'm sure. You become a more and more effective activist, there will be people that will eventually start to look at you and want to know what you're doing and maybe how many dogs you have at home and so forth and so on. And remember also that what's legal today isn't necessarily going to be legal tomorrow, and they will find ways to come after us if once we become effective. A case in point, we were working on a campaign in California to stop primate vivisection at UCLA. And so we had been doing a lot of vociferous demonstrations. We'd been doing, we'd been going home demonstrations. We'd been doing lots of things that really made a lot of people mad. It also made a couple of the vivisectors quit and stop doing vivisection. So I gauge its effectiveness by that. But the California legislature passed a new law that says it's against the law now, from now on, it's against the law to publish the names or home addresses of anybody doing research in a medical facility. And so instantly, overnight, everything on our website basically became illegal because we had, the names of the people that were torturing monkeys to death in laboratories. We had their phone numbers, we had their home addresses, all of that information. So what was not illegal one day was illegal the next. And we've seen the same thing happen in the UK. Many of the things that activists did there that used to be perfectly legal are now outlawed. It's against the law, for instance, to support the underground. You can't walk around saying, I support the Animal Liberation Front, or here, buy this magazine from me because all the money goes to support the Animal Liberation Front. They made that against the law. So things do change, and it's important to plan for that, because the more effective we become, the harder they will start to try to make us not be able to do what we're doing. It seems like I've been talking a long time already. Let me talk a little bit about some offline behavior. When you're not online, probably the most important thing is don't talk about things that you don't need to be talked about. Most people should be on a need-to-know basis. If you're planning a demonstration, tell the people that need to know. Make sure they get there. Make sure they know the things they need to know. But especially in the planning stages, when you're deciding where to go and what time to go and everything, it's best to just keep everything on the QT amongst only the people that need to know. It's also never a good idea to talk about doing illegal actions to anybody except the people you're planning to do those illegal actions with, and that should only be in a very private setting. When you go to a demonstration, you generally follow the rules about whoever's organizing the demonstration, but there are some things you can do and practice when you're at a demonstration that makes the demonstration more likely to continue and more likely to be successful. If anybody asks you, who's the leader of this organization, who's the leader of this demonstration, who's leading this protest, you don't have to tell them. There's no point in telling them. If there's somebody who's been designated at the demonstration to be a legal advisor or a legal liaison, then you can point out the legal liaison if you want to. You don't have to. You can just say, we're all here, independent activists standing against animal abuse, and that's all there is. The problem with there being a leader and the problem with people pointing out who the leader is that then whoever it is that has an interest in stopping it, whether it's just a bystander, whether it's the police, whether it's somebody else, they go to that leader and they think they can deal with that leader and get the whole thing shut down. But if there's no leader, then there's no one for them to talk to, and there's no way for them to to shut the thing down. Or if there is, it takes them a lot longer, because now they got to, I can't just talk to one person. I have to deal with each individual person, separately, and that takes a lot longer. And meanwhile, the demonstration goes on, and we can get a lot more done. Never any reason at a demonstration to use each other's real names. Don't say, "Hey, Joseph Buddenberg over there, how are things going tonight?" Cop's going to write that down. Cop's going to go, "Well, Joseph Buddenberg is here at this demonstration." Now, they may not know who Joseph Buddenberg is. They may never know who he is, but they might, and they might say, "Okay, well, we know if he's here, then so and so is going to be here." There's just no reason to do that. No need to give the police additional information, or anybody any additional information that they don't need. You never have to talk to the police at all, as a matter of fact, and most people forget this. I mean, we all talk about it. Yeah, you don't have to talk to the cops. You have the right to remain silent. We all talk about that all the time, but when push comes to shove, people want to talk. I don't know. A cop comes up to you. He says, "Hey, how you doing? My name's Bob," and your first reaction is, "Oh, hey, I'm Jerry," or if Bob comes up to you and says, "Who's the leader here?" Your first impression is to say, "Well, it's not me, but that guy over there might know," and things like that. Or they might just say, "Hey, it's a nice day out here. What are y'all doing? How long are you going to be here?" That sort of thing. You don't have to say anything to them at all. And in fact, it's easiest just to turn around and just walk away. Unless you're being arrested or detained, you don't have to stay there and talk to the police. And there's almost no good reason to ever stay there and talk to the police. If you're the police liaison, then sure, that's your job, is to talk to the police and make sure that the activists can stay there as long as possible by stalling or by pointing out our rights and so forth and so on. But if you're not the police liaison, there's no point in talking to the police at all, and you don't have to talk to the police, and you can just turn around and walk off. If they try to stop you, then you ask them, "Am I being arrested or detained?" And if they say yes, well, then you may have to stay there and be in their presence, but you still don't have to talk to them. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to tell them your name. You don't have to tell them why you're there. You don't have to say anything at all. There's a great video of a guy that I used to work with on Sea Shepherd, who was detained by the police, and they kept asking him questions, and he just did not say one word. And this went on for 3/4 of an hour. They just keep talking to him. They say, "Oh, you got to talk to us. You got to tell us your name. You got to do this. You got to do that." The guy did not say one word for the entire 45 minutes. Very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable to have someone talking to you and you not talk back to them. But it's perfectly legal, and it's usually a good idea. The other thing is, demonstrations, you don't want to talk about who's doing what. You don't want to say, if the police are harassing some guy that's maybe shaking the front door of the fur shop or something like that, you don't want to go, you don't want to speculate. You don't want to say, oh, what's his name's over there talking to the police, he's going to get in a lot of trouble. Or you just don't want to talk about anything that's going on. Even later, after the demonstration's over, there's no point in talking about that sort of stuff, because there may be somebody around that's listening and that will take that back to them. I feel like I've been talking a long time, so I'm going to let Joseph talk for a while. We'll have lots of time for questions later, but let me turn it over to Joseph and take a break.
Hey everybody, I'm Joseph Buddenberg. Been involved in the animal rights movement for almost 20 years. In the subject of multiple federal investigations under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. I was jailed for 2 years for liberating mink from fur farms, liberating about 6,000 mink from fur farms. For those who don't know, the AETA is a 2006 law that essentially criminalizes acts of economic damage against animal enterprises. So it's a piece of designer legislation that is there to protect animal abusers from our movement. I've been harassed, surveilled, and targeted for both above ground and underground actions. Ultimately, it's not about legality or illegality. It's about our effectiveness as activists. And when you do effective activism, you're up against some corporate and government forces that want to destroy you and want to neutralize your movement. So wanted to talk a little bit about what to do if you're visited by the FBI as part of an investigation, or if you're targeted by police. first thing, you know, the FBI may show up to your job or to your home and try to question you. The only thing you have to say to them is, I want to talk to an attorney. I have nothing to say to you. They'll generally go away. If you have an attorney already representing you, you can give them the name of that attorney. And it's actually illegal for a federal agent to continue to contact a represented individual. Not to say that they won't do that, but more often than not, they'll go away once they know you have an attorney. Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the repression that's been occurring through, you know, the past maybe 40 years of the animal rights movement has been in response to like effective campaigning, both above ground and underground. I mean, it goes in waves. In the 80s, there were a lot of ALF lab raids targeting university laboratories and freeing animals from laboratories. You know, visits, grand juries, arrests, all that stuff. We've seen that with the Green Scare, the early 2000s. The Shack campaign was a big wave of repression. Yeah, anytime you're up against these forces, you're gonna face some form of repression, whether that's an arrest at a demonstration, the possibility of an arrest at a demonstration, or more serious repression in the form of like FBI visits, arrests, and grand jury subpoenas. So, you know, I think security culture is just our best weapon. Information only flows between those who need to know it. There's no reason that anyone should speculate about who's doing illegal activity. There's no reason that people should be telling complete strangers about their desire to commit illegal activity. If people want to do underground action, that's something that needs to be done with people they deeply trust and have known, and you know, they know won't crack under pressure. So if someone is coming into your movement and they're completely just asking everyone that can hear if they want to be involved in illegal activity, that's a huge red flag. They should be told that that's inappropriate, that's a violation of security culture, and they need to stop. If they continue doing it, then you have to deal with it. And there's a lot of debate on how to deal with repeated violations of security culture, whether you just keep them at arm's length and watch them, or if you completely kick them out of your group. There's a lot of debate in progressive movements on that. But yeah, any movement that's effective that targets corporate and state power will be a target of these forces. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're doing legal or illegal action. It's if you're effective, they will target you. I saw a document the other day that focused on AAM, actually. It was from a private security firm, and it talked about some demonstrations that AAM had done, and it listed some key individuals that they believed to be at the demonstration. One way to prevent that, I think, would be for people to not, you know, if you have a demonstration, maybe think about not tagging people in posts on social media, because that's just like government intelligence operatives. That's like their treasure trove of information is social media. So be a little more discriminate and a little more careful about what you do online. Yeah, I mean, I can go into grand juries a little bit, but I mean, as far as I know, it's not an active threat right now. There's no active grand juries against the animal rights movement. I can touch on that a bit briefly later. There's a history of grand juries being used against the animal rights movement throughout their history, but that's not an active threat right now. FBI visits are more common. I mean, most of the effective animal rights activism that is done falls under the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act. It's a very vague law that protects animal abusers. There's like a $10,000 threshold of damage. That's not very much money. So a lot of times after effective actions or underground actions, the FBI will go on fishing expeditions. They'll visit people in the local community. They'll try to recruit informants. Sometimes they'll set perjury traps. You know, they'll show up to your work or home and they'll ask a question they already know the answer to. Like, for example, they could ask me, do you know Jerry? Do you know Jerry Vlasak? If I say no, I've just lied to a federal agent. That's a crime. So you want to just stick to the script and say, I have nothing to say to you. I want to see an attorney. And they'll usually go away. Yeah, I mean, really, our best defense is silence. Our best defense is security culture. You know, if you're not involved in illegal activity, there's no reason you should be speculating about who's doing it. And there's no reason that someone should be coming into your group to ask, you know, who could be involved or if people want to be involved. Like I said, that's something that happens after deep levels of trust. Jerry covered a lot of the stuff that I wanted to say about public demonstrations. I mean, sort of appoint someone as a police liaison, and they can approach the police and talk to them. Like he said, if police ask who's the leader, we don't have a leader, but I'm willing to talk to you, and delay them. Don't answer any direct questions. Just say, we're here to protest. If they ask what group you're with, you don't have to tell them any of that. You're within your legal right to protest, and the Fifth Amendment always applies. You don't ever have to say anything to police and FBI under any circumstances, whether you're detained, arrested, no matter what. So keep that in mind. If you are ever visited by the FBI, always write a public statement about it, notifying the community that the FBI is moving around, that the FBI is making visits, that the FBI is harassing people. The community should always be aware of police harassment, an uptick in police harassment, and it's a good time to share know your rights information. The NLG is a great legal resource for people that are targeted. You can always contact the National Lawyers Guild. They have a website, and they're pretty active about dealing with police repression of various movements. They've dealt with grand juries. They've dealt with all manner of police and FBI harassment. So if you don't have an attorney, you can contact the NLG, and they'll probably set you up with someone. Yeah. Me and Jerry can both go into behaviors of some infiltrators. I think we've both dealt with some of that, some behaviors to watch out for, and some behaviors we both dealt with amongst people that try to infiltrate our movement and get close to us. So if you want to,
if I could jump in, I think if the people talk a lot about infiltrators, and they're like, oh, is he an infiltrator, or we have an infiltrator? But I think the point here is that if we're practicing good security culture, then we don't really have a lot to worry about from infiltrators. And my point has always been, yeah, that guy's acting a little sketchy. I don't really know. We don't know where he came from. He just showed up. Blah blah blah. But hell, hand him a sign and put him to work, because he's at the demo, and we might as well get as much use out of him as we can. And if you're practicing good security culture, you don't have to worry about the guy getting you in trouble. You don't have to worry about the guy going back and talking to the feds and saying, oh yeah, well, this is what I found out, this is what's going on. Because if you're practicing good security culture, you're not sharing that information. You're not sharing anything about doing anything illegal. You're not sharing anything about your organizational structure or your organizational plans. The guy shows up at a demo, put him to work and get as much out of him as you can. If he later on turns out to be an infiltrator, then obviously he's not going to be tolerated in the movement. But until we know, there's no point to be worried about it. We don't have to go around, and more importantly, we can't let our suspicions of people coming in that we don't know, we can't let them disrupt what we're doing. We can't say, oh, well, that guy's here, so now we have to call this off, or we better not do that because that guy's here, something like that. So we can't let them get us sidetracked either. Not to preempt one of the questions, but since Joseph was talking about FBI visits, somebody asked if you're more likely to be arrested or targeted by police if you don't talk, and the exact opposite is true. People who don't talk, the police lose interest very, very quickly. As an example, I've been fairly high profile in the animal rights movement for a long time, but back in my earlier years, the FBI showed up at my house one day, And they came to the gate and they said, hey, we just want to talk to you. They were super friendly. They, how you doing? We just got a couple of questions about something that happened a while back. And I said, go away, I'm not going to talk to you. And they say, well, listen, it's nothing. And we just want to, we just wanted to, I said, go away, I have nothing to say. And I had to go through that about 3 or 4 times. And finally they went away and I have not heard from them since. Whereas the guy or the girl who speaks to them and says, oh, hi, it's nice to see you. My name's, such and such. I don't do anything illegal. And they go, oh, yeah, of course not. Well, the bottom line is once they get you talking, they will keep you talking. And they will come back and talk to you later. And they'll talk to you over and over and over again. So if your best chance of not only not getting arrested, but of not having to deal with law enforcement is as soon as they learn that you're one of these people that doesn't talk, they completely leave you alone.
Yeah, and to add to that, usually if you're an FBI target yourself, they won't visit you. Like I had several years of repression and I was never personally visited by the FBI. What they did is they visited people around me trying to recruit informants against me. And I mean, my security culture was always pretty tight. So, I had close friends, I had partners who had no idea what I was doing when I was underground. So as Jerry said, if people exercise proper security culture, that neutralizes a lot of their attempts to entrap us or gain information. Should never tell anyone about illegal activity you've done, unless you've been, in my case, I talk about some of the activity I've done because I've already been prosecuted for it. The statute of limitations has expired. But if you're currently engaged in illegal activity, you should not ever talk about it. You should not ever tell anyone. You should not ever talk on cell phone about your desire to get involved in that kind of activity. Nothing on social media. Those discussions should only happen with people you are working with who you know and trust.
Do you guys want to go to questions now, or do you have a little bit more to present?
One thing I didn't mention under just online security is that your computer is the one thing that is probably the most valuable thing that law enforcement can take from you and try to get information from. It has a lot of information about who you correspond with, who you talk to, what websites you visit, and plus any other data that you keep on there. And I think everybody should be aware of hard disk encryption, which is a way to keep all that data on your computer encrypted. I had my home raided one time, and they did first, main thing they took was all the computers, and they eventually gave all the computers back, several years later, but there's no indication that they ever were able to see what was on those computers. Now, it's not 100%, and if they can send it to some, lab in Quantico somewhere and probably figure out what it is, but unless you're of a very high threat level to them, it's not likely that they would. It's very, very difficult for them to decrypt an encrypted hard drive. So there's a lot of software out there that's really easy to use. TrueCrypt, BestCrypt, bunch of different newer ones. Same with your phone. You can easily keep your encrypted so that when you turn the phone off, it can't be looked at. And by the way, the police do not, as of now, have the right to take your phone from you at a demonstration, for instance, and require you to give them the password or anything like that to look at your phone. So if they do that, they're violating the law, and you should just stick to your guns and not do it, and there's nothing they can do to you. One minor point that about FBI visits again, and Joseph made this point, I just want to underscore it. If you ever are visited by law enforcement, it is important that we spread that to the rest of the community, because there are other people out there that don't know security culture or that aren't as well versed in security culture. And so we need to use that as a learning opportunity to let other people know, hey, there's cops coming around, they're asking questions of these people, of certain people, so that if they come to your house, we want to make sure that you know that you don't have to speak to them, you don't have to talk to them at all, you don't have to let them in the door, you don't have to tell them your name, you don't have to do anything at all. And so we can use this as an opportunity to spread the security culture atmosphere around. So anytime that anybody is approached, I think it's a great idea to let people know that you were approached. Try to remember anything that the law enforcement said. And then, you know, the more information we have and the more information that we can circulate in the activist community, the stronger it makes us, and the more able to resist whatever it is the clowns are up to.
And I would add to that, if you are visited by the FBI, get their business cards if you can. You can ask for their business cards. They might give it to you. They might not. And once you have an attorney, you can give that to your attorney. The attorney can call them and say, hey, you visited my client. What's this about? May find something out. But at the very least, they can't continue to contact a represented individual. So it should put an end to it. So get those business cards if you can when you're visited.
You guys ready for questions?
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Happy to answer any questions.
Right. Yeah. And of course, add any other points that you, as you know, as we go along. But I'll start with, there were a couple of questions in the chat. First from Ina. What about Zoom in terms of security? How secure is Zoom? Do I know?
Almost nothing is safe that you do on the internet. Signal is safer. It's end-to-end encrypted. It's, you know, run by people that, at least in theory, oppose cooperating with the government and won't turn over that information to the government. But nothing you do is completely secure. So, you know, just exercise security culture on every platform. Don't ever talk about illegal activity or plans to do anything from, you know, vandalism, open rescue to underground action. Like, just don't do that. But if you're having an activist meeting about an above-ground protest, it should be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think Zoom is encrypted. In other words, our conversations are being encrypted, but there's nothing that's not. This is not something that I would trust. And it's not just underground activity either. I think if you're planning say if you even some of these more targeted demonstrations and things like that, we don't necessarily want people knowing what we're up to. We don't want people knowing that, you know, we're going to a certain place at a certain time and we're planning a certain event and that sort of thing. So we don't want to give them any more information than we have to. It allows them to be ready for us when we come. I mean, we can get a lot more done if they don't know what we're up to, I think is a good way to put it, even if it's not illegal. So I think there's a reason for security culture, not just among people who are out, you know, obviously breaking the law, but even people that are pushing the limits. Again, anybody that's effective, they'll find a way to come against us if we are effective. And you know, the targeted demonstrations against the fur industry are having an effect, and I would expect to see some repression coming down the pike. One thing we didn't talk about was civil actions. In addition to dealing with the police, actually sometimes more difficult to deal with is civil actions, and this was used effectively by the opposition in the SHAC campaign, the Stop Huntington Animal Cruelty campaign, in which different activists and different organizations were sued in court by the animal abusers. These are unlike criminal law, where you can go in and represent yourself and say, you know, I did this and I did that, and here's all the cruelty that's going on and blah blah blah. With civil actions, you don't get to do any of that stuff. It's all done on paper. It's all very complicated. You have to hire lawyers to defend yourself, and if you don't, then, you know, they can come after monetary damages, and they can, you know, bankrupt your organization or bankrupt you personally, or, you know, all kinds of things like that. So to protect against that, again, anonymity is a good way to go. If you're going to be pushing the envelope, I wouldn't run out and create a 501c3 with a bunch of people's names all over it and home addresses and telephone numbers, because that just gives their lawyers somewhere to serve all the paperwork. Much better just to you know, call yourselves, you know, good animal guys, and that's who we are, and, you know, there's nothing written down anywhere about it. And again, another reason not to use names. They don't know who to serve. If they don't know what your name is, they might follow you home, and, you know, you got to deal with that. But anyway, so civil actions were used relatively effectively in the SHAC campaign, and I think it's something that we need to be aware of at least.
Yeah, adding to that, more recently, that was used against the No New Animal Lab campaign in Washington, which was a campaign to stop the construction of an animal laboratory at the University of Washington. And billion-dollar construction company called Skanska sued the activists involved, what they regarded as the leadership, and got an injunction against them that effectively stopped public protests. And I think some of them even owed damages in civil court to the construction company. So that's another reason, to kind of remain anonymous. And if there's an action, a protest, keep that information offline. Don't tag everybody that was involved, because that just gives police and private intelligence, the ability to go to those people and serve them subpoenas and lawsuits.
And that brings up just another point. You didn't talk a whole lot about snitches, but I think it's important to remember that no matter what, nothing is worse than you even mentioning the name of another activist when you're being questioned by law enforcement or the animal abusers themselves or anybody else. There is just never, ever, ever is it okay to mention anybody's name, even in the nice way, even in a way like, oh yeah, he married my sister, or something like that. There's just no reason to ever mention anybody else's name. We've all, any of us that have been in the movement long enough have known people who have snitched and who have given information about other people. That's just never okay, ever okay.
Yeah, you raised the Peter Hammerstedt example, Sea Shepherd, where he was interrogated and he said absolutely nothing. My co-defendant Nicole actually did the same thing when she was interrogated. She, everything from, how are you feeling today? Nothing. She just stonewalled them completely. And so that's the best. It's pretty uncomfortable to be in handcuffs for hours and they won't let you see your attorney, but you gotta just remain silent no matter what. You gotta tell yourself that speaking will only hurt you, and there's no reason to talk to them.
All right, we have a bunch of questions coming in. So I'm going to go first to a question from the chat, then I'm going to go to Milena. But Shreya had asked, how about wearing ALF merchandise? Is that okay?
I think it's great. I think it's a public support for the Animal Liberation Front is a great thing. There's nothing that violates security culture about that. The only violation of security culture would be, to approach someone and say, at a demonstration or something and say, do you want to do ALF actions with it? That's inappropriate, but no, wearing ALF merchandise is totally fine.
I would add the caveat that if you're thinking about becoming a member of the Animal Liberation Front, it's probably not a good idea to broadcast that in advance by doing that sort of thing. It's not illegal in this country to support the underground, ALF or any other underground group. It is illegal in some countries. I'm corresponding with a prisoner in Slovakia, and it's illegal to even support any illegal direct action there.
Shreya, do you want to mute?
Oh, that wasn't me.
You guys hearing that?
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I just wanted that background noise wasn't me. I wanted to clarify my question. Thanks for addressing that, Jerry, because I asked that question when you had brought up the legality of openly supporting the Animal Liberation Front, and I know a lot of us activists have pro ALF merchandise, so I just wanted to know what the legality of that is. But yeah, it looks like it varies from country to country. So
yeah,
thanks.
in the United States, at least, you're perfectly within your rights to wear any supportive thing.
Just a funny anecdote, though. I was wearing a Support the ALF sweatshirt once, and this person at a restaurant was like, "Hey, is that a local group? How do I join?" And I'm like, "Oh dear." But anyway.
Well, I mean, I use it as an opportunity to talk to people about who they are and what they do.
Oh, yeah. I did explain the whole thing about who they actually are. And you're like, whoa, I got to learn about them. So that was pretty cool. Okay. Yeah, but I was like, no, they're definitely not local to only St. Louis. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Shreya. Milena, you want to unmute and answer the question?
Actually, I kind of wanted to share a story real quick. We just did the Tampa turnout and we went and visited a place that operates as a primate sanctuary. And they I stayed on public property the whole time. Other people went into the sanctuary. It was during open hours. They had a suggested donation. They went in very quietly. Everything was documented. I returned back to work on Monday, and the owner had come out when we were there, and she had taken pictures of people and things like that. Monday, I was the founder of the school that I work for came outside and said, hey, somebody called me from the Suncoast Primate Sanctuary and said they specifically talked to you and talked to your husband, Cubby, and that you came with kids from the school and that you mentioned the name of the school and that you had megaphones and you were talking about signing petitions and bringing kids to sign petitions. Well, none of that was true because my husband wasn't there. I was on public property the whole time. The only person I spoke with was Debbie Cobb, the owner, and I have it on video. So I'm thinking what they did was went online, found my AAM shirt because I did wear it that day. Probably found me on there, looked me up on Facebook, found my husband's name, found my name, found that we work at the school. The school is supposedly a plant-based school, and in the past they've had children visit the school because it was supposedly a sanctuary. But anyway, we don't have jobs right now. It was dealt with really, really poorly. But I just wanted you to be aware that anything that you wear, anything that you have, things, they can look you up on Facebook. They can, make false allegations. They will call your jobs. You just got to know that this is something that when we do these kind of things that, expect that something might happen. And I just wanted to share that story with you because it was something that just recently happened and, it did affect us personally. And we still plan on going to this place. And handling what we need to, but yeah, that's where we are right now. But thank you for letting me talk. I just want to let you know that it could be as simple as that. So just watch what you post, watch what you wear, and just know that that's possible.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think a lot of the times when police or whoever does this, it's just to try to intimidate and stop the campaigns because they don't like what you're doing. Most of the time, it's not going to result in an arrest or any serious repression. They're just threatened by the activism and they want to stop it. So
I'm going to go to a question in the chat, then I'm going to go to Dana after that. So Trey was asking, how do we create an environment that increases security online that increases security culture while at the same time giving room for mistakes, especially for newer activists? Jerry.
Yeah, it's definitely you're definitely walking a fine line, or you're walking, on a fence here, because social media is good for recruiting people and getting people to show up at things and educating people about animal abuse and all of those things. So we can't say that there shouldn't be any social media, but I think we as activists, when we start talking, we should talk about security culture much more than we do, or much more than I've noticed lately. It was more popular when there was more higher threat level stuff going on, but I don't think we talk about it much anymore. I mean, I think people should, at the very minimum, use Signal, or we don't text message with them. I think it should be stressed at, before every demonstration. Here's how we behave. Here's what we say. Here's what we don't say. Here's if there's police involved, talk to the police. We got somebody that will, but you don't have to, and you shouldn't. We don't want you to. So I think we can build security culture into our daily lives more so than we have been doing, so that everybody's at least aware of it, so that if some activist does get questioned by a cop or something, that they've heard the spiel a couple of times already, and they are more likely to go along with it. And I think we can't tolerate people, like Joseph was saying earlier. We can't tolerate people speculating about illegal direct action, or speculating about who's doing what, even within the legal framework. Who's speculating about who's doing this and who's doing that. I think it needs to be mentioned a lot more than it is, so that security culture becomes part of who we are as activists.
That's why we're so grateful that you guys are doing this training to educate new and old activists. So I'm going to go to Dana. You can unmute and ask your question.
Okay. All right. Hey, so I just wanted a little bit of clarity on something. So you were saying like maybe don't tag people in AAM. Now, this is the question. Like, I feel like some events, I feel like I do a lot of events. They're very legal. They're very public. The police are there. And I do like to tag everybody because I want everybody to, I want it to be shown to as many people as possible, to be honest. So, and I know I have one activist here who does not want to be tagged. I never tag him. And I know people can put blocks on their Facebook. And I feel like cops, they probably, I mean, they obviously can just go on AAM's website and see everybody's name. So are you talking about just for like highly like secretive things? You're not talking about for like a zoo protest or for like a fur protest or something like that, are you? Just curious. Circus, that was recent.
I mean, it's obviously up to your discretion, but I feel like it's a bad idea to provide them with intelligence that they don't already have. I mean, we shouldn't assume that they already have access to that information, like make them work for it, you know? Again, like Jerry said, coming out of the Shack campaign, Skanska, they do serve injunctions when they want to stop a campaign, especially when it comes to like these really hard-hitting anti-fur campaigns that are going on right now. I think they would love to serve an injunction if they had an excuse to, and you know, if they already have the names available on a Facebook post, it'd be much easier for them to know who to serve that paperwork to. So, not to like heighten the paranoia or increase paranoia, but people should try to stay as safe as possible.
I think it, you know, like Joseph said, I think it depends on the threat level of the campaign. If you're doing you know, peaceful demonstrations outside of you know, a circus or a zoo or something, probably doesn't hurt to you know, to mention who was there. I mean, it seems like a lot of demonstrations I've shown up at recently, you know, people all sit around and take a big selfie at the end of every demonstration, and so you know, your face goes up, and nothing wrong with that if you're doing, you know, an AV cube or something like that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think if you start getting on somebody's nerves, if you start getting on LVMH's nerves, which I'm sure we are by now, they're going to start writing these names down, and they're going to keep track of them. They're going to say, you know what, that guy is here, here, and here, and this guy there, there, and there, and then one day they're going to draw up this big fucking lawsuit. They're going to have all those people's names on it, and they're going to know where you live, and they're going to know how to get a hold of you, and they're going to show up with a process server and serve all these people, and it's going to have a huge effect on the campaign. I hope I'm not predicting something that doesn't come to be, but I can see that, having been involved in other campaigns that were increasingly effective, and I think that's the bottom line. The more effective you get, the more likely you are to see that. So, you know, balance it out with the campaign, I think.
Yeah.
Just as a recent example of that, we did a protest at Louis Vuitton pretty recently, and 2 of us were arrested. And during the protest, we were greeted by mall security by name, the 2 of us that ended up getting arrested. So it's clear that like police are watching the social media and, you know, see who's tagging who. And then they meet with private security or whoever else they have to meet with. There was a plainclothes detective there as well. So, you know, just be prepared for that sort of thing, and, you know, don't give them any more information than they don't have already.
Okay. Like, I just feel like sometimes like, for example, like you do like disruptions and stuff and there's like nobody in the store, then it gets it out. I see your point, but I don't know. It's like kind of a confusing situation. I feel like with some things, because I feel like some things I go to and like there's not really that much point in being there. I feel like it doesn't make a big impact on the store, or as big of an impact, or there's not that many people around, but I guess I'll just have to like weigh it out. But thank you for your perspective.
I think you're. I'm sorry. I think you're missing the point on these in-store disruptions. We're not there for the people. We're not there for the passerbys. We're not there for anybody. We're there for the store employees. And every time that one of those store disruptions happens, it goes to corporate. okay? They have to. They don't even have any wiggle room there. So every time we do a store disruption, corporate gets a memo, okay? And that starts piling up. It has nothing to do with the people there. You could be yelling out nonsensical stuff through those those megaphones. The signs can be in gibberish. It doesn't matter, okay? It has nothing to do with the people that are walking by. If anything, we're pissing people off probably more than anything, and that's just part of the strategy. And there's times to be nice to people and talk to them and try to educate them, and there's times to piss off the people that are working in the store, who then tell corporate, who then gets upset and then changes their behavior. And we've seen that over and over again, and we know that's how it works.
That's a very, very good point. I didn't think of it like that. Thank you, guys.
Great. I'm going to go to a question in the chat, then I'm going to go to Leaf. So the question from Mona Lisa is there a safe way to destroy old laptops, computers, and hard drives? A hammer?
Yeah, you can destroy the hard drive, or you can continually erase the material over and over again. There was a house raid many years ago where this was so long ago that I guess I can talk about this 13 or 14 years ago, but me and my co-defendants were in a house about to be raided. The police were staked out outside, and one of my co-defendants was accused of continually erasing the hard drive over and over and over again. And so when the police got that computer, they couldn't get any data off of it at all. Physically destroying the computer, throwing it away, yeah, that's the only ways I can think of.
Yeah, bottom of the ocean works for me. I think that's probably a good place to start. There is software that does what they call like military grade erasure, where it goes over and over and over and over the data like a whole bunch of times and chops it up into pieces so small that supposedly they can't figure it out. I have a feeling if they spend enough time and money, they probably can, but better than nothing. It takes a long time, and you have to kind of set it up and let it run for 3 or 4 days. But that's one option. But again, I think if it's at the bottom of the lake or the ocean, it's probably not going to do them much good if they can't find it. And even if they do find it, it probably wouldn't work.
I would also advise against that tactic necessarily if you are subject of a pending investigation to, destroy the data while the police are outside. You can technically probably be charged with like obstruction of justice if you do that. There have been some Earth Liberation Front cases where people were charged with destroying evidence. So yeah, just be careful. And if you have a laptop that you want to get rid of, then be safe about it.
Okay, maybe a bathtub instead of the ocean, more environmentally friendly. Okay.
I'll probably hear from my Sea Shepherd friends about that.
They're going to be
throwing a computer in the ocean.
What? Leaf, you're next. You can unmute and ask your question.
All righty. Well, thank you for the presentation. It seems you've given just enough information, and we have a lot of new people on this, just enough to make them paranoid. This presentation could have been twice as long, but I have a few comments. You talked about phone security, and one thing I want to mention is don't use the face or the fingerprint, because cops can put your finger up to their phone and unlock it. And you talked about Signal, and if it gets into security issues, you can use the blow up messages, and that can be down to 5 seconds if you're like in the middle of an action. And you talked at length about pictures on social media, and I am totally cool if you do like, you're just doing AV or you're just in front of a store and you're staying totally legal, that you tag me all you want. I don't care about that. I forget what I was going to say about police and social media. Oh, the police with social media, the police are watching all our actions, and we know this for a fact. Like when you put a action on Facebook, like a Facebook event, because they will show up to our event sometimes if they're pretty sketchy events, because they have software that allows them to put in search words or local search words. The last thing is, it seems like the two presenters are coming from the underground movement, and I want to tell people to be very careful about doing underground stuff versus open stuff. The underground movement was very big in the 80s and 90s, and it was extremely effective. And I've talked to the founder of ALF. It was very effective and it was very good. But now I believe that with the movement I'm in, that open rescue, where where open events where you don't hide your face are much more effective because you're telling everybody that you believe in what you do. And that goes along with wearing clothing that supports your organization. By all means, do it. My organization, Direct Action Everywhere, has been written up as being one of the top 10 organizations to take down animal agriculture. You show up with 200 people at an action and they're all wearing Direct Action Everywhere shirts, that's going to be scary in and of itself, even if you don't do anything. And I would like to see what you guys think of open organizations, since you guys have come from the underground.
I mean, above ground demonstrations, campaigns that are effective and strategic, and, you know, pressure campaigns are great. I don't see much efficacy to open rescue. I mean, you're essentially committing felonies and then posting it openly. I mean, there's an individual in the Czech Republic who does a lot of open rescues and for some reason has not faced any police repression. You can find that on the press office website. Just hundreds and hundreds of lives saved without any repression at all that I know of. In the US, it's a different story. I mean, there have been people charged with felonies for open rescue. I think if you run the numbers on underground clandestine direct action, the number of people arrested and the number of crimes solved is very, very, very low. You know, we've only had a handful of ALF prisoners throughout its history. There have been
around for a lot longer, right? We just now started getting into the open rescue stuff, but we're finally having court cases, and we believe that it's been very effective, that we've been open about it. We've been proud of what we do, and we're trying to change the law, but that's a slow process.
Yeah, I mean, there's good and bad. There's good media that comes out of it.
Exactly.
But you know, you can get just as much media with an underground action where nobody gets caught. There have been multiple fur farm raids within the past few years in the United States, and no one's been caught, or no one's been visited, no one's been apprehended. So,
tens of thousands of animals have been liberated by the underground in the United States in the last 20 years. I can count the number of people that have gone to prison for any length of time at all on one hand. It's a very effective and a very safe form of action. I don't think there's anything wrong with open rescue. I think there's a time and a place for open rescue. The guy in the Czech Republic gets away with it, and the people in Australia got away with it for years. Eventually, they're going to crack down. And in the United States, they're not very happy about it. I mean, you know, your own, Wayne. I know Wayne Sung is facing multiple felonies and many.
Yep, he's going to trial in September.
But I agree. There's a place for it. It educates a lot of people and it saves some animals. But I think there's definitely a role for underground direct action as well. Let's not spend too much time on that, because that's not really the topic of the conversation.
All right, thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Let's come back to security culture, and I'm going to ask. There's a question in the chat. Sorry, there's so many questions coming in. Trey had asked, if you're being detained, do you have to give your name, address, or ID to the police?
In Texas, we had some people recently that were charged with failure to ID. So I think that varies state to state. But it's like a Class C misdemeanor. It's punishable by a $200 fine or something. I had a situation where I was detained at St. Laurent for shortly before they went for free. Cop asked for my ID so he could give me a trespass warning. I refused. I was charged with trespassing, but I was not charged with failure to ID. So I think it depends on the cop, and it depends on the state. So
I've refused to give ID many, many times, and the worst case is that they detain you longer while they run your fingerprints and then figure out who you are. They won't let you out of jail. If they do arrest you, they're not going to let you out of jail until they know who you are. And so you can show them an ID and maybe be out faster, but you never have to show them your ID, and you never have to say a word to them. You don't have to tell them your name. You don't have to tell them your address. You don't have to tell them anything at all. You literally do not have to say one word. it's hard to do because as we're social beings that are taught from the age of 1 to respond to somebody when they speak to you, and it's hard to have somebody speaking to you and just stare at them and not say a word. It's very difficult, but it's completely legal, and I've never heard of anybody being charged a separate charge for refusing to talk to the police. I think when they say you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to remain silent. They don't say, well, except you got to tell us your name and address and all that. No, you don't. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to ask for a lawyer. You don't have to do anything. You literally do not have to say a word. But it may end up keeping you in jail longer until they figure out who you are, because they won't release you until they know.
Thank you. Such clear information. That's why it's important to know your rights. So Jonathan, JJ, you're next. Unmute.
Hey everybody, I have a quick question that my friend asked me to ask on his behalf. It's Robert from Slaughter Free Chicago. He's called into the meeting, so he can't raise his hand or put the comment in the chat. So he wants to know what your thoughts are on balancing media promotion with also being anonymous at actions. It's kind of difficult to do both, so.
When I was doing above ground campaigns back in the day, I used to use just a fake name with the media. We get KPFA. I mean, there's no rule that says you have to give the media your real name. So you can still talk to the media without giving them your information or identifying as being in a leadership role. Yeah, so.
I personally think it's probably not a good idea to be doing illegal direct action and appearing in the media at the same time. I think one or the other. I mean, I've made a point all my activist life to tell everybody my name and who I am and so forth, but also speak very vociferously on behalf of those who are breaking the law. So it's like, here I am, come bother me if you want to. You're never going to bother the people that are breaking the law. I don't think it's a good idea to mix the two things. I don't think there's been a couple of episodes where members supposedly of the ALF actually went on TV wearing a mask and everything and talked to the media. I think it's a bad idea. I think it exposes them to unnecessary risk. They're some of the very, very few people that are willing to risk their freedom and their life to help animals. Why not let others of us speak on their behalf so they can stay much more likely to stay safe?
Yeah, and to clarify that, I meant more for above ground campaigns. I think it's fine to talk to the media, and if you want to stay anonymous as part of the campaign, you can use a fake name. But if you're actively involved in underground illegal actions, yeah, definitely don't talk to the media. There's a press office to handle that. There's people that will handle that kind of work. So
yeah, he's specifically talking about the more above ground like demonstrations. So cool. And then one comment, because I heard people talking about using Signal. Obviously Signal is more secure than text message, but it doesn't matter if you put it down to 5 seconds. The risk with Signal is if one person in that Signal group that you're messaging with isn't who they say they are screen recording every single thing that's sent, and then it is permanent at that point. And it's not, you don't need to have a warrant to like tap a phone to do that. So it's still not secure. So you can assume that, you know, there's still a chance that it's out there, even if you put it to a 5-second delete. If you put it in writing, it can end up in the wrong hands. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jonathan. And the other thing that we didn't mention is there's something called keyboard loggers, which can be placed on people's computers that basically record every time you do a keystroke. So it doesn't matter where the message is going or coming. I think they have to have a warrant for that kind of thing, but they can actually, there are other ways around it. So don't put anything on Signal or anywhere that could land you in legal trouble.
So I'm going to go to a question in the chat, then I'm going to go to Jenny McQueen after that. David asks, are there websites to know our rights as Canadian activists, or is it the same as the US?
Laws vary from country to country, and the amount of repression varies from country to country. One thing I know for certain is there's no legislation like the Animal Enterprise Terrorism Act in Canada. And there have been people caught doing underground illegal actions in Canada, and they faced much less severe sentences. But no, that varies from country to country for sure.
And to answer your question, I don't know of any websites that talk about our rights and liberties regarding Canada, but I'm guessing you could probably find one if you look around. I just don't know.
Okay, if anybody has any resources, go ahead and put them in the chat. And now we're just going to go to Jenny McQueen. You can unmute and ask your question.
One kind of general point, we're talking all online stuff. I've had a police raid and all my notebooks were taken of like writing, you know, the old fashioned way. So I'd also caution, don't write stuff down after having that experience. The other thing I'd ask is, I've done open rescue, charges were dropped, but also I wonder, ag-gag laws are being introduced in Canada and they've already introduced here in my province. So underground activism is possibly the way to go, but do you think that ag-gag laws are being introduced, whether it be underground or open rescue?
I think ag-gag laws are specifically targeted towards those who, you know, are open in public, recording those things and putting out to the media and doing more above ground structures. I think like an ag-gag law is not really going to affect an underground direct action because there's already, you know, burglary laws or terrorism laws that would prevent people from doing those kinds of actions. And if they're still doing them, they're not going to worry about an ag-gag law. That's more specific to people that are above ground and trying to expose that industry publicly.
And most of the ag-gag laws in the United States are being overturned on appeal, though I haven't seen anything real recently, but the last 2 or 3 I've seen were both thrown out by appeals courts. So I don't know. And again, I don't know what's going on in Canada exactly.
Texas just overturned their ag-gag law a couple months ago, I believe. So maybe in March, they overturned their ag-gag law. And yeah, I've heard of Idaho, Utah, a bunch of other states have all overturned their ag-gag laws.
Yeah, we've got a strong animal justice organization of criminal lawyers, animal rights. So they're working to overturn ag-gag laws here too.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Okay, I'm going to go to a question in the chat and then I'm going to go to Jose after that. So Myra Geyser is asking, is there anything that can be done to protect activists from having a civil case or worse, have an injunction placed?
I mean, that's a tough one. Like Jerry said, maybe not creating a 501c3 with a bunch of names on it. You know, if you do a home demonstration outside of, like, I know with the Sconsic campaign, one of the things was that the CEO had a home demonstration outside of his house and, you know, a couple people were detained and maybe people tagged each other on social media. So yeah, I mean, just kind of like understanding the risk level for those kinds of things. The more risky actions, the more strategic actions. Don't advertise that openly on social media. You know, use a more safe route, signal, and keep that thing under wraps maybe.
Yeah, anonymity is the key to avoiding those lawsuits because once they find out who you are, you know, you're fair game if they think you're in a leadership role. So I would say even go to, I mean, back in the Shack campaign, I mean, even above ground demonstrations, a lot of people wore masks and masked up, and so that even if, I mean, there were always people there taking pictures of us at every demonstration and, you know, compiling files on us. But there were some, I remember there were some of the younger activists that showed up and they never went at all without a mask on, a full mask. And so they just never, nobody can sue them because they don't know, they never found out who they were. So it's difficult, and it's a very effective strategy on their part, and I'm surprised they don't use it more. And I hope they aren't paying attention.
If you are going to do a high risk action like that too, I mean, in my experience, it was always the person that was driving that was sort of targeted. The police get behind you, they run the license plate, they know exactly who you are. So, you know, if you can take public transportation to those demonstrations or Uber it to a home demo event, whatever you can do to keep yourself safe. I mean, it's all on a case by case basis, but you know, can never be too secure. And I mean, I hope this stuff is empowering and not just inducing paranoia. I mean, it's all about self-defense and protecting our movement.
Yeah, every time I get the feeling that feeling paranoid, I keep saying over and over, there was a guy named Andrew Lindsay was an activist in England, and he said, you don't feel the chains until you begin to move. And the more they target you just means the more effective you're being. And so every time that we see this increased repression, instead of getting all scared and hiding under the cover somewhere, I pat myself on the back and say, you know, we're getting them. You know, we're making a difference here. And to Joseph's point earlier, yeah, when we would do home demos, we would always rent a van and take, you know, all the activists that were going to show up were all in that one van. So the worst thing that could happen is one guy could get pegged. But that if there were 8 or 10 or 15 activists, at least nobody else got pegged for having, you know, 5 cars or 6 cars all show up at the same time.
Thank you. Jose, you're up. You can ask your question now.
Okay, can you hear me, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Joseph and Jerry, for doing this workshop with AAM. I just briefly wanted to say that as long as you're on social media, they know who you are already. You just gotta be in peace with yourself. If you're not doing nothing illegal, nothing criminal, just be at peace with yourself, because a lot of people, by accident, we scare them away by filling them up with too much fear. They already know what you're doing. If you are gonna do something illegal underground, yeah, for sure, do not mention it. Another thing that I just wanted to share with everyone, specifically with certain individuals, you know who you are. And I just wanted to say that a fellow animal rights activist said that one of the best ways to practice security culture, if you're planning on rescuing animals underground or for getting footage, is for you to not be a animal rights activist who's overground, who's like doing protests or any sorts of actions that are gonna be like live stream or like in photos in Facebook. Just stick with the underground stuff and you'll be okay. And that is all. I just wanted to share some information. Thank you.
I think that's a good point. Compartmentalizing your life as much as possible is useful. If you're doing underground action, maybe don't be the same person that's running that campaign publicly, or, you know, going to every single demonstration. If you're operating underground, then, you know, maybe just compartmentalize that work.
Okay, I'm going to go to a question in the chat from Tom, who just simply asked, are phone calls and emails effective?
What do you mean, phone calls and emails to targets?
I'm guessing he means between activists planning.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Tom, if you want to clarify, you can raise your hand, but we'll go on to Jasenia then. Go ahead and unmute.
Hi,
Mr.
thanks for
Buddenberg and Mr. Vlasak. Thank you for this great presentation. Thank you specifically to Joseph for your history of liberation and compassion, something that did not become outdated in the 80s. I had a question for both of you regarding resources for the audience currently. When this presentation is done, do you have any recommendations for where we can seek further knowledge about security culture, where we can educate ourselves more? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
There's a lot of zines and info on security culture, mostly coming from like progressive movements and anarchist movements. I could provide those resources to people if they want to reach out, and I could send you some text like that.
CrimethInc is a good resource. They CRIMTHNK, I think they're spelled anyway. CrimethInc. They have a lot of resources regarding security culture, dealing with the police, grand juries, a whole bunch of really good stuff. I order their flyers every once in a while and give them out in addition to the stuff that we already have. So.
Thank you, both.
All right, Tom is with us now. So Tom, do you want to unmute and clarify your question?
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, my question simply was just sending these stores emails, ask them to stop selling fur. Just tell
Yeah, I
them to
think
stop doing it.
I
Is it
think that's
effective?
I think it's very effective. I think they hate that. If hundreds of activists are calling their lines and they can't take orders all day, it's a form of economic sabotage. If they're getting flooded with emails and they can't, deal with potential clients. Yeah, a lot of the above ground work that I like is, a form of economic sabotage. So when we're doing these disruptions and customers can't get in, that's going to cost them money. That's going to cost them a lot of money, especially these high end fur retailers that are selling thousands and thousands of dollars worth of products within a day. So yeah, I think phone calls and emails campaigns are great. That's a form of economic sabotage. It shuts their work down for the day.
Yeah, and I think the underlying point is that we have to have these targeted campaigns where we just are relentless against a target until that target stops abusing animals. So I think it's just so good to see this type of activism coming back into vogue now, because the Shack campaign was built upon the many other campaigns that were similarly directed primarily in the UK against a single target. These targets caved, a lot of animals were saved, and it's good to see this kind of actions being used once again. So I'm pleased to see that.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm not seeing any additional questions unless I missed a question. If so, Trey will let me know, or you can repost it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. We'll give it another couple of minutes to see if there's any more questions.
Myra says you missed mine.
Repeat your question, Myra. Oh, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, Myra? Hello.
Yeah, both of you, thank you so much for this workshop. I was wondering if an activist needs to do research or planning or have stuff written down to make an action happen, what's the best way for that to be done with security culture of devices and stuff like that?
Tor is a browser that you can use anonymously on a encrypted machine. There's also like MAC address changers out there that you can utilize. Electronic security, I would use public computers a lot of the time. So I would drop into a public library with like a Linux disk and do research that way. Try not to keep too many personal notes. I mean, I had a raid one time in my first federal case where the police broke down the door and they found some notes on, some animal abusers, and that is all circumstantial evidence against you. So I would try to keep the notes to a minimum. I would, like, when I was driving to fur farms, I would write addresses on my hands. So yeah, all that stuff will be used against you if they find, if they build a federal case against you and they find some fur industry literature, some notes on fur farms. Those are the kinds of things that were used to convict me. So be careful with that, and use like anonymity software when you're using the internet. Public computers are ideal, or just a device that you have just for that explicit purpose. And don't use Wi-Fi at your house.
Yeah, back in the day, we used to do our research in internet cafes, but they don't really have internet cafes anymore. So a lot of libraries still do have public computers, so it's always a good idea to use that if you can. There's also, you mentioned Tor, there's actually a number of entire operating systems, like Linux operating systems, that you can contain on a single thumb drive. And any computer you plug that thumb drive in, you can just boot from that thumb drive, and you're operating on a completely separate operating system that doesn't leave any trails behind, and it's completely anonymous. Anytime you're surfing the internet, doing research, you ought to consider using a virtual private network or a VPN. Besides Tor, there's lots of other commercially available ones as well. So yeah, that's actually sort of, other than using your own Wi-Fi, that's gotten around a lot of the problems that we had when now that there aren't any more internet cafes. But those are some ways to remain relatively anonymous while you're on the internet. Also, don't use Google searches, obviously, and things like that. There's a search engine called DuckDuckGo, which actually doesn't leave as many tracks, or maybe no tracks at all. You can always use that in addition to everything else that you're doing.
Thank you.
Great question, great resources. Paula, you have a question, you can unmute.
Okay. Okay. Well, first, I just want to say I think it's prudent wherever possible for people to not use their real names on social media. I think that you really cut down on a lot of bad exposure. That's just an opinion. Secondly, I do have a question. Does law enforcement have the authority to force, like Facebook or any of the other social media platforms, to release information like passwords, your real identity, or this, that, or the other thing?
Absolutely. A lot of times these social media platforms will just turn it over. Law enforcement won't even need a subpoena. It's very easy for the police to get a subpoena if you're under investigation. I mean, it's usually only going to be utilized as part of a serious federal investigation. But yeah, they absolutely will turn it over without a second thought. Usually they won't even need a subpoena.
Okay, JJ, you have another question?
Yeah, two quick things. First of all, you talked about not using Google, which I was going to mention, not using Google searches, but I know a lot of activists, or just in general, people use Google Maps to get where they're going. Highly not recommended, especially the higher risk action is. The more you should just go to road maps, the old-fashioned way, because there's less of a trail there. And yeah, just Google in general. There's DuckDuckGo that you can use. Even Apple Maps is more secure than Google Maps. Apple has a history of not being cooperative. There was the, I forgot, the San Bernardino, they didn't cooperate even when it was actual, like, humans dying in an actual terrorist attack. They weren't able to get anywhere with Apple. So one of the reasons I use Apple products for my activism. And I'm not paid by Apple to say that. And then I have one question, now I just lost it. Oh, you mentioned phones at the demo and how they can't take your phone or search your phone without a warrant. I do know instances where activists did have, because the police, when they arrest you, they take everything from you, every piece of jewelry, your face mask, even in the middle of COVID, literally everything. And they did take activists' phones, and they did not give the phones back when they let the activists out of jail. They then went to the judge to get a warrant for the phone, and they were able to get into activist phones. And my understanding, and you can correct me if you're wrong or if you disagree, but my understanding is that it's much easier when the device is in their possession for them to get that warrant than it is for them to get a warrant to, like, raid your home to get the phone to then get a warrant for it. Is that accurate information?
I don't know if that's accurate or not, to be honest with you. I know they can get a warrant to get the information off of your phone, and I know that they do have ways to break into it if you refuse to give them the information. There was a highly publicized case with iPhone. You mentioned being an iPhone fan, and they're definitely better than a lot of other phones, but there is a company somewhere, I think they came out of Israel or something, that was able to break the iPhone encryption. That said, I had my phone taken by Customs and Immigration once when I came back into the country. They told me to turn it on and put in the password, and I refused, and they confiscated it, and then they sent it back to me about 6 months later. And of course, I didn't trust it at that point. I figured they probably put all kind of spyware and stuff on that, so I threw it away when they sent it back. But that said, I think there's no doubt that they do need a warrant. And the point is, they can't just some cop can't just tell you, turn on your, put in your password because I need to see your phone. Like they can search your bags, they can search your car if they have probable cause, but they can't search your phone without a warrant. And I think getting a warrant is more difficult than just saying it's probable cause. Whether that's easier once they have the phone in their possession versus taking it from you later, I don't know the answer to that question.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I'm not seeing any other questions. Maybe we've answered all of them. I'll wait just a second to see if there's one final. This is our last question, I would say, of our program, and then we're going to have final words from Joseph and Jerry. So S, you have your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute.
Yeah. So a lot of social media accounts require your phone number or something that could be tied back to you. If you want to exercise privacy, one thing you could do is go to a phone store, you know, with a face mask and just buy a phone with cash. You can just provide them an email. They do it all the time to people who may not have proper ID. So you can take that phone and then never turn it on at your house, but turn it on when you're out and about, and create all your social media accounts that you want, and just do it that way is one way to remain anonymous. The
old burner phone, yeah, those have been around since way back in the day. But yeah, absolutely, you pay cash for the phone. You have to pay. I don't know. I haven't done it. I haven't seen one lately, but you have to, recharge the account every once in a while because you used to have to pay for the minutes and things like that. But yeah, that's definitely one way to stay anonymous.
We used to use those burner phones during phone actions. Buy a phone at like a corner store, and then you can call the target hundreds and hundreds of times, and then just throw the phone away when you're done with it. So, it's a very good tip.
Yeah, we used to use pay phones, but those don't exist anymore from what I hear.
I think this is officially feeling like an episode of Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul now, if anybody watches those. All right, how about walkie-talkies? That's we got to bring back walkie-talkies. Thank you, Debbie, in the chat.
I actually used walkie-talkies effectively at a fur farm, where activists are taking a shed, each taking a shed and emptying a shed of mink, and communicate walkie-talkie and make sure everyone's okay. Yeah, so if you're going to do underground action, actually
we'll bring
don't
pagers back. What's old is new again for activists.
Michelle?
Yes?
Yeah, just so I could say something, because I think it was, I can't remember what was his name, but he was talking about the cell phones. Even if you have your cell phone off at home, the new ones are already throwing out the signals to the tower. So they already know who it belongs to. If you have it at your house, that phone that you bought, if it's close to your property, it's sending signals to the tower, and they're already gonna know. So if you just don't have that cell phone close to where you live.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I didn't mention earlier also is pretty much any car made in the last 10 years or so has built-in GPS devices on it, so they can actually tell where your car has been, even if you're not punching in the address on the GPS, they still track, they can still track that if they want to. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
And I wanted to add, you can get these little Faraday bags. One company is called Silent Pocket. You can, when you're out and about using your phone, your burner phone, you can do your activism, then turn it off, take out the battery, put it in this Faraday bag before you go home.
Thank you very much. Oh, what a complicated world we live in, technology-wise. Who would have ever thunk it? So I'm going to throw it back for just final words now. I know we could talk so much more, and we may need a part 2 to this training, certainly. But Jerry and Joseph, some few final thoughts to leave us on.
I just want to say I'm grateful for the chance to talk about this. I think we need to talk about it on a more regular basis, but it's good to you got to start somewhere, and this is a great place to start. Thank you to AAM for putting all this together. The worst thing that can come out of something like this, though, is if people start getting paranoid and start not wanting to do things because they think, oh, there's just so much out there and there's so many things going on, and I'm going to get, you know, this or that, or something's going to happen. It's not going to happen. I mean, most people stay safe and most people are fine. We've given you some ideas of how to stay even safer than you already are. It's extremely unlikely anybody in this group is going to go to jail or even get a visit from law enforcement. But again, I said it 2 or 3 times during the talk, the more they bother us, the more effective we're being. And so I worry when they're not bothering us. And I'm glad, I hope they keep bothering us, because that means that we're having an effect. And I think that's the way we should look at this, and not, instead of being afraid of it, be proud of it and be happy that they're targeting it, and that means we're hopefully doing some good for our animals, brothers and sisters.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to echo again what Jerry said, like this is designed to be empowering, not disempowering. Shouldn't just get overwhelmed with paranoia. There's only been a small handful of people that have gone to prison for animal liberation. Visits are pretty rare. Grand jury subpoenas are very rare. In my case, I was underground liberating animals for many years, made many mistakes, and it took the feds a lot to build a case against me. And in the end, I only did 2 years in prison for liberating thousands and thousands of animals. So, you know, repression is the cost of action, and the more effective you are, the harder they will come after you. But it is very rare that you'll ever see any of these things. You'll probably never get visited by the FBI or police, and you'll probably never see a courtroom. So that's important to keep in mind.
And I do want to remind everyone that we have a more in-depth workshop with Joseph and his story on our YouTube channel, on our AAM YouTube channel. So you can go there to learn more. I know we have one more question, but maybe you can put that in the chat and we'll make sure to get that answered through the chat. So we're going to wrap up.
I did want to add one more thing, if I could, that I didn't get to talk about. But part of COINTELPRO's charter was to disrupt, misdirect, isolate, and neutralize effective activists. So, you know, part of security culture is to not spread rumors about activists that are FBI targets. If you can't verify the validity of the rumor, maybe don't gossip or don't slander people. I know that can be kind of a controversial point, but the FBI has used that tactic against all manner of progressive movements that it was threatened by. So, you know, if you hear a rumor that someone's a bad person, don't automatically believe it, investigate it for yourself, and, you know, maybe don't spread that and gossip about that.
That's a great final point. If anybody would like to share in the chat any of the takeaways that you're going to walk away with and apply today, what you learned, that would be great. Maybe Jerry or Joseph can answer in the chat, where can people donate to support? And maybe, I don't know if Jerry, you want to put up your contact info again for the screen share. I believe you had up your social media contacts, your website, unless someone has that handy and can join that. Trey reminds us that Joseph has a Patreon as well to support Joseph. And okay, great. So hang on, everybody. Let me just make a few quick announcements, and then we're wrapping up for our program tonight and really thanking everybody. So yeah, so everybody can see the screen share while we're doing that. So, you know, AAM has ongoing workshops. We have workshops, 2 to 3 workshops a month, just like this, informative, enlightening, educational workshops on animal rights activism. Our next workshop is not until July 9th, but that's a vegan hospitality workshop. August 25th, we have a workshop, an insider look at the poultry industry with Karen Davis. And we do have more workshops to be announced as well. A couple of our large in-person events are coming up as well. The AAM Chicago Convergence is a 10-day animal rights activism event largely focusing on taking actions against the fur industry. That'll take place in Chicago. Dates are July 29th through August 7th. You really want to register soon for that if you want to join us. Also, the AAM Ohio Occurrence, a 3-day animal rights activism event in Cleveland, featuring all different types of activism events. The dates are September 2nd through the 4th. If there's any events I'm missing, feel free to put those in the chat. Feel free to share your Instagram handles or any other social media information that you like to share with everybody in the chat as well. And so Electra and I thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Trey, for your behind the scenes assistance. Thank you, Joseph and Jerry, for all of your time and wisdom and all of your work. And thank you everybody for the work you're doing for the animals of the world, so that we can keep this movement going. Please tell your friends about AAM. If you want to become a mentor or a mentee, to become more involved or to donate, visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. In the meantime, we're going to add you, if we have your email or if you'd like to share that, we'll add you to our newsletter, email newsletter list where you can keep up with all the happenings through AAM. So thank you, everybody. Until next time, stay strong and live vegan, everyone.